Welcome to Spatial Conversations. My guest today is Tyler from our partner webAI, and we're going to dive into all things AI, spatial, and otherwise. Welcome, Tyler.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Well, let's start with a little bit of kind of the origin story of what inspired you to really lean in and create this thing called webAI, and what is it?
Absolutely. So the company started with, we were friends from college, so David, Ethan, and I. And the premise was that AI had to be accessible and it had to be local to actually be really important and address the key problems that you'd want to solve with it. So when you think about the problems that you'd want to solve with AI, whether it be self-driving, something that you could use in a medical emergency for helping with a surgery, being able to make sure that your internet isn't cut off, that you always have connectivity to it, is super important. You're not going to have self-driving car communicating with cloud to make sure it's functioning properly. And so, we're friends from college, and we in 2019 initiated the company when we had to actually receive money. But the company is the tech is older than that, so a few years before 2019, but really focused on getting AI to be able to run on a device that you could afford, and on infrastructure that you can
Mhm.
control.
I like that. So you use that magic word local, and obviously the self-driving car example makes perfect sense. When we jump to the enterprise, though, of okay, I've got a building, I've got people at computers, I've got servers. Why does local matter then?
So local matters. So most of the data that AI has been trained on is general context, right? It's the internet. And that data doesn't actually work on solving most business use cases. So when you go talk to ChatGPT or another provider, it works well for general questions, but it lacks specificity when it comes to how your company operates or things that make you really unique. And when you want to bridge the gap between the general solution and the final solution, what you want to be able to do is make sure it's in an environment that you control. And local is the closest thing to, and local doesn't have to mean it's on my laptop, but it could also be on the computer that I control that's, in the other room or in our office in Michigan.
Okay, so it's
Um,
about the control at that
it's
point.
about the control.
Okay.
It's about the control.
And so you mentioned having the ability to train and essentially get your proprietary stuff in there, and of course that's where a lot of folks are going now. Of I can custom train a model and go run it in cloud provider XYZ. How's this different when it comes to kind of having that again your intellectual property locally?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a core thesis the company has that companies shouldn't have to go through cloud to be able to get solutions that work. And your ability to be able to train a model and own the infrastructure to create these solutions is as important as being able to create the solution itself. And so when you lease out your competencies to someone else, you're able to rent time on a solution. But when you think about AI, a really good pattern to think about is more of a human pattern, right? And there's a place for contractors, but most of the time you want to work with full-time employees, you want to build out your staff, and you want to make sure that that's an internal competency that you have. And you don't want to be dependent on external factors that could actually fall out, that could raise in cost significantly over time. And so when it comes to like a cloud solution, it may make sense for some certain use cases, but by and large, your company is going to be something that you want to be able to control and leverage without someone else being able to pull the rug from underneath you.
And that sounds like that's a really good parallel with what we're hearing from Apple, for example, around Apple Intelligence and retaining control of your hardware and your data and those kind of things. How do you see kind of the Apple Intelligence creeping into the world, and is there any crossover between that and some of the things that you guys are envisioning for the future?
Yeah, absolutely. So Apple Intelligence is actually, I would say one of the pioneers in this space. And when you look at how a lot of the other companies are approaching tech, it's predominantly from a cloud perspective. And so what Apple was able to do by localizing that competency, reduces a lot of the risks associated with sharing personal data, being able to ask it questions that you may not be comfortable being exposed to something that you don't control. And I'm a huge fan of what they did for the private cloud. I think that that was one of the coolest ways to be able to get the compute necessary when you need it, while being able to retain control. The crossover, I would say, kind of separates when it comes to the type of models that you want to be able to create and how you want to be able to control that solution. And so where Apple Intelligence really excels is in the personal dynamic, and it helps with general problems that you run into. But one of the areas that we try to work on is being able to make sure that the customer is able to create and control everything from the data it has access to the hardware it runs on, who has access to that thing. And so it's not something that like we provide to our customers. It's ultimately something that the enterprise adopts, and then they foster and they share that internally. And so we're out of the picture, and then the company is able to run it.
And that fits in with some of the things that our two teams have been talking through, which is really kind of that core enterprise business value being powered by webAI, and that AI running where I control it and I know where it is, but potentially being triggered by Apple Intelligence at the front end of that, of actually using that as some of the user interaction model and then bringing it back into the power you guys are providing.
Absolutely. No, I think one of the things that Apple does really well is Apple Intelligence is everywhere you'd want it to be. And so when you're interacting with a text field, or interacting with Spotlight, or interacting in text, it brings AI into those environments. And a really cool interaction would be being able to selectively choose the AI solutions that you have in those different environments. And so when I'm writing an email, it may be useful to reference a model that has access to a specific project that we're working on. And so it's not generally rewording it, it's actually providing updates on the state of the project, advancements that have happened within the project, and that specific knowledge that a general LLM doesn't have access to.
Right.
And
Or
so
it
that's,
specifically got some training on my voice and how do I normally communicate.
yes, no, absolutely. It's personalized, it's contextualized, and that's a lot of times what we're missing when it comes to AI solutions is how do you actually get the final 10% of the solution that the person would need to provide? And that's generally the context.
Got it. So if we step back from some of the personal use and the advantage that we're going to be able to derive from some of that, and we talk about really I'll say the realities of AI today, and then we'll come back and talk about tomorrow, but in terms of what's doable today, some of the business cases that you're seeing that are really, I would say, high impact, high value, what are the right business cases that our business leaders should be thinking about that they could actually achieve today or near term, as opposed to some of the pie in the sky stuff that we're hearing about? Anything jump out
Absolutely.
at you?
Yeah, so I think the quickest one I can think of that I see repeated interest in, and this is from aviation to automation to even personal use cases, is the ability to talk to your documents or a knowledge base for education purposes. I have a 1,000-page document and I have a specific question and I can't search the document, but I want it to return a response that is able to pull together the information across the document to give me the context I need. And that's something that all you need to get started with is a Mac Mini and a couple PDFs. So that's an immediate use case.
And that's something that I love about the way you guys have implemented it, which is that today that's doable in a variety of contexts, but I don't know if I can believe the answer. And I love that you've built citations to the source material right into it from the get-go. I think that's so helpful.
That's really important. When we started building it out, one of the core, we have two words in our name. They're web and AI, and the reason that we put those two there is we think there's the problems of AI are ultimately going to come down to your ability to understand where the data comes from, what was the source of that data, was it AI generated, was it human generated, and to trace it back to its roots. And so the web in the name is actually laying in traceability into the sources that you're pulling from. And so having a watermark, an immutable stamp that says, hey, this is the response, this is what was generated by the AI, and this is the data that was pulled, this is the config of the AI that created it, allows you to review and filter out bad data over time and also improve the solutions that you create.
Now, is that resonating with customers? Is that something they're looking for, or do they even know that they need that yet?
It's a little bit of both. I think if you use AI, you know that you need it.
Mhm.
And so a lot of people that are familiar with AI know that they need the ability to peer review the content and the source of it. If you're not familiar with it, then everything AI says is generally within the construct of reason, and they don't really know that it could be wrong. And so this is where being able to say, hey, this paragraph comes from this source material always gives the ability back for the end customer to proofread what they're getting from the AI.
Nice. Now I know we've had a lot of conversations with customers who are AI has to go into things that are happening in their strategic plans, and there's a lot of boiling the ocean kind of thinking going on of let's pick this infinitely far-reaching. Here's how we're going to approach AI, and the how do we take the first step hasn't really generated yet. Um, where are you seeing folks take that first step really on the business side where they're getting some of that business value and any examples you could share? So we talked about kind of the rag and talking to my
Yeah.
documents. Any examples of either that or other business cases that where you've either have a customer you can talk about or you can kind of walk us through something to make it a little more real?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's I'll go through one of my favorite stories. And this is really a cool use case that I can only talk about because the tool has so many different controls inside of it. And this one goes actually more to vision. So this isn't a general use case, but this is one of the cool stories I think that shows what people can do when they have the right tools. So we're working with a company in automation, and what they were working with was they basically had conveyor belts, and they had miles, like this mile-long warehouse where packages are flying everywhere inside of it, and they had an issue where there was a fire that happened within the warehouse, and they couldn't actually get a proper read of the gases um, from the fire sensors in the warehouse because it's so big. And so the amount of smoke you would need to actually see or determine that there was a fire didn't work with your traditional fire detection software. And so what the individual did was he was able to take the security camera footage. He was able to plug it into his camera feeds, and then he was able to train a vision model to detect fire on the conveyor belts
Visually.
visually.
Interesting.
Yep. And so he didn't need to worry about getting extra hardware. He didn't need to worry about doing anything crazy. He was able to do it by himself on a MacBook, which is a really cool use case.
Oh, I love that. And just the repurposing the tech investment that somebody's already made, in this case, those cameras, and then AI being able to bring extra value to that. I think we're going to see things like that everywhere. That's very cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And for companies getting started, I think the common thread there is really the education and is being able to put your data, whether it be real-time data feeds, changing data sources. So, RAG, when we talk about it, is traditionally understood as a document you talk to.
Hmm.
But you're able to create real-time data feeds that change based on different states. And so what you really start getting into is a knowledge-based management with an AI on top of it that allows you to talk to it. Kind of like a program manager, a project manager, or an area, someone that's an expert over a field where you can just talk to them and you make sure that you get the most up-to-date information on that state. And that's a really
Hmm.
popular use case as well.
I love that. And I had an example of an organization that we're working with that implemented something similar to that in the HR space. And as a big part of going through it, they were realizing their data wasn't ready because as they piped the data in and they were getting answers out, they had humans reviewing the answers saying, these answers are wrong. And then someone reviewed the source material and said, oh, the source material is wrong.
Yes.
So that's a
Yeah. Yeah.
challenge. Yes.
Yeah. No, and I love what you pointed out too. And ultimately AI is as good as the data you equip it to.
Hmm.
And I think one of the reasons that people should start getting engaged with AI, even if they don't know what they're doing, is because it might actually show you that your data is bad. And it lets
That's a
you
great point.
understand your data faster than you'd imagine.
No, I really like that. And that I would definitely see that as one of the biggest challenges for folks is that getting to that data, whatever it is, and again, it could be the HR documents, it could be core manufacturing data. Um, it's very often not as clean as we would like it to be, and that might be that first effort they've got to get into. That great point. Um, well, we've been spending a lot of time talking about AI. in this interesting spatial environment here. So if we forecast a little bit more of kind of the crossover between AI and spatial computing, anything jump out at you of kind of some of those interesting opportunities for the future?
No, I think it does. And so before getting involved with AI, the previous company I was at, I was working with spatial tech, right? So the original HoloLens and all sorts of companies that are now out of business. And the thing that struck me early with AI was how it really brings software back to a human pattern. And so,
What do you mean by that?
so when we started with software, we started speaking in binary. So language, computer language that we like programming languages are created for software. And as we've gotten new advancements like into Python, it's almost like writing in English, but it's not quite there yet. And AI is the first form of software we've had where we're able to interact with it similar to a person. And
Mm-hmm.
this is the same thing that we're seeing with spatial tech, which is instead of having everything in the form of like a tablet or a flat surface, we're able to interact with it in an environment that we're used to growing up, which is a spatial environment. And so I think what we'll start seeing is AI and VR and AR coming together with software that is more intuitive to a person, that can interact with
Mm-hmm.
people in a way that's not as alienating, right? Like it's something that your grandparents should be able to use because it is in a form factor that it's used to it and it can communicate with them like a human can in a way that they're familiar with.
I like that. And a great point on the programming language. I've definitely seen that I fully expect that English will be the most common programming language in the very near future, with all of us able to just talk to our AI companions now.
Yes, yeah, 100%.
Oh,
And it's crazy
nice.
right now how even, AI is reading our hands, right? So the
Absolutely.
reason that it's even here is because that's AI.
Hmm.
So I would,
Yes.
it's fair to say that spatial technology is currently incredible because of AI.
That's a great point, and that's something that I don't think most folks are paying attention to. Is that it's AI has been baked into so many things for so long, and whether it's the photographs that we're taking, or now with this amazing Vision Pro that we're wearing, and all of the just the thinking it has to do to allow us to have this kind of an interaction.
No, absolutely. It's when you use maps, you're using AI.
And that's an
Very cool.
interesting statement. Yeah, yeah. So if I'm that enterprise and I really want to lean in and get started, any suggestions on how to make sure that number one, my team isn't freaking out as we start to
Oh
roll
yeah.
out AI? Let's start there. How do I start bringing in that culture where people see it as something that helps as opposed to takes all the jobs?
No, I think that's really good. I think one of the things we have to address is what are you actually getting AI from, right? Like, what is the thing that is giving you access to it? Who's the person that created it? What are their policies behind it? Because by and large, what AI does is it has the ability to learn patterns from interactions and train on them to be able to reproduce them. And so knowing who is providing the solution that you're using is actually the first step, I think, in being able to understand that it's safe to work with. And so companies that can actually provide AI solutions to their employees, I think, are in a unique position to say, hey, we created this thing. We know the policies that are behind it. We know how the data is used. We know how
Okay.
it works with you, and it's not going to replace you. What you can't say is what someone else's policy is when they're using their tool or their solution. And so I think that enterprises have a unique opportunity here to be able to address some of those concerns, but that they can really do that if they internalize that competency.
Great. Now, so once people get a little more comfortable with it, anything you found to help people feel more comfortable with tinkering and learning, since this is no longer about, hey, we got the one AI guy and we're fine. Like, well, no, how do we internalize this a little more broadly?
Yeah, this is a really good question. I think one of the things that makes it really special is when you're able to interact with it in a way that's special to you. And so it's often creepy when you don't understand what's happening in the background or if it's working on things that you don't understand.
Mhm.
But I think when you start working with AI in areas that are fun or a little bit more creative or something that you enjoy, then you're able to get a little bit more familiarity with it. And, I've found that image generation is a really fun area to work with, and everyone can appreciate
Mhm.
a fun meme about a cat or a dog,
Or your holiday
right?
cards. That
Or
was
your
awesome.
holiday cards.
Hmm.
Yep, exactly. So I think finding the thing that's easier to interact with, that's a little bit more fun, goes a really long way. And I think people should start using those.
I love it. Um, well, last question for you. So, if we put that futurist hat on for a moment and kind of fast forward, so we've heard that the general intelligent AI is going to be here next week, next year, 10 years out. Let's set that all aside. What's the impact AI is going to have over the next 5 years? Where do you see it taking us?
So I see a delineation between common AI and what I think we mean when we say AGI. And so when we say AGI, I think it's fair to say AI is able to regurgitate knowledge better than most humans can on a very wide domain,
Hmm.
right? So as far as intents and purposes go, it is better. It is a better doctor than I am. It is a better, uh, like it can be better at all these different things than I am. And so I think it's fair to say to some definition that we may have hit AGI. The thing that I think we're trying to get at is something that supersedes human capabilities. And the way that I kind of see this happening is we'll see a standardization in AI practices that are adopted by a wide variety of companies. To your point earlier on the HR use
Hmm.
case, I think that is something that every business would benefit from. There's not a single company that shouldn't have an AI that helps their employees out with HR. And so you'll have these standard use cases that are able to work with the existing tech we have. And then you'll get into use cases that take very complicated, very compute rich, very high compute environment tasks. And those are things like solving cancer, creating things like rocket ships, innovating on those on different areas. So I think we'll have the standard areas, and then we'll have the peel out abnormal use cases that come out of it as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And thanks again for jumping in today with us. I definitely appreciate it. Thanks for joining us for another episode of Spatial Conversations. And of course, we have to end with the magical fist pump.
Bam.
Awesome. Thanks, Tyler.
Hey, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.